After 47 years and millions of lives lost to fighting, years of contention between the Soviet Union and the United States, the Soviet Union ultimately collapsed in 1992. And in the wake of the collapse, what occurs is a huge amount of uncertainty. And I think that's a trend that I hope you're seeing throughout the course of the last couple of lectures. When the Soviet Union collapses, there's a power vacuum that emerges. The United States is obviously still a very powerful influence, but you also have European powers like Britain and France and Germany, who are continuously in the spotlight. You also have, with the Soviet Union collapsing, the reunification of Germany that happens in the early 1990s. So that East and West Germany that had existed in the previous lecture is now back together. So the German Democratic Republic, formerly East Germany, is basically folded up. The Federal Republic of Germany, which is West Germany, is remains, and a new country or a unified country emerges. Once the Cold War and all of the troubles that come along with that have dissipated, what occurs is a growth in economic unity throughout the globe in the 1990s and then in the 2000s. You have huge amounts of investment flowing around the world as a result of increased connectivity, better travel, better internet service, or the development of the internet and then internet service, um, and demand going up, better living standards, less hostility between two major powers, the United States and Russia. All of these things increase the demand for better goods, more goods, and you have better connectivity and interrelations. So the graph that you have on the screen now is an image that shows us the flow of capital. Largely, you can see the red showing investment funds that are coming out of the United States, going to places like China and South Asia, European funds going into both Canada and Americas, Brazil into Asia, Russia, China. But then you have Russian money going around the globe too. So you have obviously a huge amount of funds going around the globe, again, increasing that internet connectivity. The greatest development of interconnectivity comes with the European Union. The European Union is officially established in 1992 with a treaty called the Maastricht Treaty, Maastricht. However, the European Union had developed a bit earlier. In the 1970s, you have something called the European Economic Community, which was sort of the predecessor of the European Union. The European Economic Community was the first sort of attempt to make trade among European countries more equitable. It was free trade, and it was a way for the Europeans to share resources and develop. In the wake of World War I and World War II and the Cold War, it was a way for the Europeans, to come together and share resources and remove competition that had dominated European politics for hundreds of years. By 1992, there is a more official establishment of the European Union, and it creates a block of countries. At first, there's only a handful of countries, 12 countries initially, but then ultimately by 2019, you have something like 2020, 2019, you have something like 28 countries involved. And we obviously know, I think you should know that by 2000, you have the European Common Currency, the euro, which becomes the major international currency. The United States dollar doesn't go away. The United States dollar is still the currency of the globe. Most trading happens in United States dollars, but the euro becomes becomes huge in trading. And the reason that's so important is because, again, 20 plus countries use it. It is stronger than the US dollar, right? Trades for, it takes more dollars to get euros. So there you go. There is problems with this, right? It is not like when the Eurozone is created that it becomes, it's easy, it's an easy transition. There's something called the Schengen zone. So the Schengen zone is basically all of these EU countries. Once you have entered into the Schengen zone and your passport has been stamped, you do not have to take your passport out again, right? So if you travel to, let's say, Britain and you land in London, if you then travel to Paris, you don't have to take out your passport again. So that for an American, that's pretty good. But for the Europeans, what that means is you can travel all throughout Europe as if you are a citizen of any of the countries. You can live, you can work, you can start a family, and you can easily travel back and forth, send money. It's a great way to develop this new connectivity in the post-Cold War era. Now, that obviously has some problems. There is a rise in nationalism, which we've experienced obviously in the last 5 to 10 years, where you have, in Britain, in France, and in Germany and other places, huge nationalist movements that are questioning the stability of the European Union. And obviously that, I think, takes, that obviously is a portion of the whole Brexit debate that has emerged in the last, 5 years or so, since 2015. But you also have people who are very proud of the European Union, the connectivity that it allows, the travel that it allows, the better resources it allows, the cooperation that it encourages. Now, a lot of the things that are happening is also caused by huge migration. So many people are coming to the European Union from places like the Middle East, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, where massive wars have occurred and are continuing to occur. The European Union is a safe haven. So places like Germany have welcomed in many migrants, many refugees from the Middle East. And that, I think, has helped create a more nationalist trend within German politics, and the same is true for France, because people are questioning where, is this, once you get to Europe, you can walk anywhere. Is that really a good thing when people are putting taxes on the resources? Now, obviously, there's a humanitarian need, there's a moral need there, but there's a very real national security need as well. Why is that the case? Europe offers a lot of security, and along with economic security, there's also health security. So this chart here, this is again a little old of a chart, but it's still a pretty good chart, right? So if you go to the places that I was just mentioning, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Turkey, right? Turkey spends, if you look at this chart, right? So the green here, this is Turkey. Turkey spends between $300 and $1,000 per person per year on healthcare. But if you look at, let's say, Germany, which is where the cursor currently is, Germany spends between $1,000 and $5,000 per person per year on health insurance. Same with France, same with Italy, right? So you can go to these places and receive better health care. And that's just one example. There's also security. There's the fact that the Middle East has been in wars for decades and unsettled political situations for decades, where Europe has been pretty solid for the last 10, 20 years, 30 years maybe, if you want to take the long view. So there's a lot of migration happening into Europe, and that's creating, again, it's creating a lot of instability and fear about nationalism. The EU is also one part of a larger trend in global connectivity in terms of spreading Western culture. And when we talk about Western here, we're talking about sort of Western European or Western ideas, right? So Western here we're talking about the United States, Canada. We're talking about places like Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, Germany. But we're also talking about like Japanese and Japan's culture. But what you have is the spreading out of all of those different cultures around the globe, and the EU is certainly part of that. The EU, because again, there's so much travel between European nations, so much travel between European people. You have just a massive spread of culture, so that people in Britain can get the latest tracks released by Spanish artists. Food and consumer culture can spread throughout Europe very quickly, and that's largely due to this growing connectivity, interconnectedness of economies, right? And American companies are a part of this too, right? McDonald's is everywhere, Starbucks is everywhere, but it's also European countries. The Spanish clothing company Zara's is in every major city. You have different British companies throughout the globe, and all of these different agencies are not just bound by one location. The one last big um, item that I want to talk about in terms of this growing connectivity, that I've talked a lot about the benefits of this connectivity in terms of greater markets, greater access to goods, more economic opportunity for people. But the other piece I want to talk about is growing concern over interconnectivity and the spread and healthcare. If you look at the map again, this is a graphic you've seen before. This graphic's a little old, but I think it shows an important piece, and that is there's huge disparity in the spending of healthcare dollars per person. And why is that important? In the last few years, we have lived through major global pandemic and epidemics. If you think about 5 years ago, we had the Ebola crisis. A few years before that, there was SARS. And obviously, in our own time, we have the issues of the coronavirus. When you have places around the globe that are spending less than $300 per person, as in China, or less than $25 per person in places like Pakistan or in Myanmar or in Congo or in Brazil, again, between 300 and 1,000. But then you have places like Western Europe where you're spending over $1,000 per person per year, or in the United States where it's over $5,000 per person per year. What this is showing you is that when an outbreak of a disease happens in these places, that growing connectivity only means the spread of these diseases will be exacerbated, because you have places around the globe, Brazil, for instance, that is very economically impoverished, huge numbers of urban centers where millions of people are living on top of one another, and then they can easily travel around the globe so that you can have the spread of these diseases over massive amounts of territory. All of these things draw major problems when we talk about this growing concern over interconnectedness. So, in the last 20 or 30 years, there has been great growth in economic commitments to one another, benefits being spread across the globe, but it is not all positive. There are a lot of negatives that come along with it. There is growing exploitation, greater divide among the healthy and the unhealthy, and the final one I would talk about here is economic insecurity. It is not a surprising thing that much of the benefit of globalization and interconnectedness has gone to the Western nations, Britain, France, America, Canada, Germany. That's where many of these multinational corporations are based. And it is the people who are living in places like India, Brazil, parts of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, that are experiencing the greatest amount of economic turmoil because they work for pennies on the dollar compared to what products they produce are made. So it is something that we need to think about moving forward. And the journey through European history, I think, is a good illustration of the concerns, but also the benefits seen over the last 250 years. Take care.